In this video, we're going to look at some drum editing techniques. So what I have here is a session with some rough tracks on it. The drums, it's got a bass, an acoustic guitar, and some scratch vocals. What we're going to end up doing is recutting all of the instruments, but we need a good drum take to work off of. Now, what I have here is the guts of the drums. So we took the best single take, and I'm going to edit from there. I like having the tuning that the drums fall into be consistent across the entire song. So occasionally, if you're tracking drums for a long period of time, the pitch, especially the snare, will start to change over time. It was in a good sweet spot during this take, and this take ended up being good enough for us to kind of chop up and go through and turn this into the keeper take. I will be doing a very laborious process here. And you can call me crazy, but we're going to chop up almost every single individual hit of the drums and use the grid, since we track to a click, to give it the consistent feel that it needs for this style of kind of laid back country. The most important thing that I'm going to listen for when I hit go here, we're just going to work on the intro section in the first verse, is the relationship in time between the kick and the snare drum. With a lot of rock music, you'll have the kick drum feeling like it's ahead of the groove and the snare drum right on the beat. With this style of music, you're going to feel like the snare is right on or slightly ahead of the beat and the kick drum is falling behind it. At least that's my suspicion. So that will be the first thing that I listen for when I hit go here. And I'll make sure that I'm not going crazy and that I heard it right the first time when we were recording. Yeah, the kick drum is definitely behind the beat while the snare is on top of or a little bit ahead of the beat. By his side, I spend all my days starving for his loving, and you're the one who feeds his hungry eyes. You must think you're something else, sitting high up on your shelf. Okay, so my suspicions were accurate. It's a good thing that we checked, because if I would have edited this with the kick drum ahead of the beat and the snare drum behind the beat, the groove would feel totally wrong for the genre. However, we've got the kick drum behind, we've got the snare drum a little bit ahead, so that's the approach that I'm going to take. A lot of people like to use Beat Detective for this kind of editing and really divvying up and splitting up transients across the session here. I am going to do everything manually. I've tried it this way with Beat Detective doing all the cutting up for me and some sliding around, and I don't think it achieves the kind of feel that I'm looking for, despite the fact that that Avid has done a lot to give you the potential to put some swing in the groove. I think that if I know what the swing is that we're looking for, that I can put it in there and have it be more true to what we're going for. So we're going to close Beat Detective and not use that, and start editing all by ourselves here. So first things first, we're going to start with like maybe the first 4 bars, chop everything up, slide around relative to the grid for what I think the groove should feel like on this. And granted, we know what the groove should feel like because the drummer played it a certain way, like we were talking about earlier. So if I'm going to push the kick drum behind the beat and the snare drum ahead of the beat, I might just put the kicks right on the groove, right on the marker, and then have the snares ahead of the marker and see what that feels like first before I start stretching and moving things even more. So our first thing that we got here is a kick drum, and I'm just going to start lining up each of the kick drum hits so that the kick in mic right there, it starts to envelope right on the downbeat of this bar. And that will continue throughout the entirety of this. But we're going to, again, work on the first 4 bars, make sure it feels right, and then we'll continue on from there.
So there's a snare, and I think what's going to feel right with this song is I like to pick visual markers for this. Listening to every single hit and critically analyzing is extremely difficult to do, so if you have a premonition for where everything's going to sit already, and I've been doing this technique for a long time, so this feels correct to me, I think that the snare is gonna live about right, you know, relative to the grid, which is right there. I think these snare hits will live just about that much ahead of the groove, so like 2.5 of these waveform cycles. And I'll just start pushing. Now I know that there are going to be a lot of purists out there that say, why would you chop up drums this much? And why wouldn't you just grill the drummer until you get the perfect take? Sometimes you just don't have that kind of time when you're in the recording phase. So I'm going to do what I can here. Something that's really important too, I think, is to not do batch fades. So I don't want to get to the end of editing all of this and then do the entire selection, Command F, and do a batch fade across everything. Once you get fast at this, just start drawing the fades in yourself and you'll save a ton of time. So what we want to be aware of and cautious of with the fades is making sure that when we draw a fade, we don't get a double hit on something. So if I find something that is, let's take this snare hit, for example. Since I've moved things around quite a bit, this snare hit is very far ahead of that downbeat right there. And I'm going to end up moving this snare hit back here. Now what I want to be careful of is, let's say I didn't make a very precise cut on that. So, and right here I end up drawing a fade. Look at what's sitting right there. The start of a snare hit right there. That would not sound right, as I'm sure you all can presume. So I'll throw a few more edits in here and then we'll go back and listen to it and make sure that it feels right and that what we assumed about the groove is actually true. So hi-hat hits are an interesting one. I like to throw the hi-hat hits just a hair behind the beat to try and give it some lope. However, once we get a few bars in with the editing, we're going to take a listen back and make sure we're getting the right groove out of this editing style right here. So here's an occasion where a hi-hat hit is significantly in front of the kick drum hit, and I know that since we have room to work with right here, I'll be able to really push this thing back, and frankly, we're not going to hear much, if any, of a change. You'll still get some of the chick of the hi-hat and not have it feel like it's too far ahead, but also not feel like you're missing it because I took so much of the lead and the attack of that hi-hat hit out by doing that edit right there. Let's listen back to the first few bars and make sure that we are getting the style of groove that we're looking for here. Snare pushing and we got the kick drum dragging. That's just what we're looking for here. Now I can bring the bass in as well. Make sure we're not going crazy. That feels appropriate for this song, within this genre, with this kind of style. If this was a different kind of genre with a different style of drumming behind it, I might have a different approach. But I think this is going to work really well, and I might have a different technique depending on what the choruses sound like in this. So we're focusing on the verse right here. We've got the snare ahead of the beat. We've got the kick drum right on the beat. The verses, if they push, might have the kick drum ahead of the beat and the snare a little behind. But that's something, again, where we'll go and listen to the drummer's original take, be very analytical about it, and understand what the relationship is between the right foot and the left hand and what the feel is, where the drag is and where the push is. In this song, it's going to be the same, just based on me knowing this song pretty well. And that gives me the luxury of not having to go through and listen to each individual component and edit each individual component of the song differently. However, that is something that is not out of the question at all. That is something that you may decide you need to try. But again, more than anything, this is about gluing the drums together and having something to recut other things to. If you're cutting live, I really don't recommend modifying the drums very much, if at all. If there's something that's really off, you may want to nudge and push a little bit here and there, but for the most part, if a band is cutting live, you want to stick to the integrity of what's going on there because they're all working off of each other. If someone goofs a note, that's easy to replace as long as you tracked with isolation, but this is specifically for the intent of retracking bass, guitar, vocals, tambourine, horns, keys, whatever you may be doing to it. We're just building the foundation here. If you enjoyed this video on drum editing, please like the video, and in the comments section below, please put anything you would like us to cover in the future.